Let's jump to the story we have, and we'll see what's going on in the U.S. CBS News reports U.S. truckers planning protest convoy, perhaps starting in L.A. for Super Bowl. DHS warns. That's right. The Department of Homeland Security is warning an American convoy may begin. If it's anything like what we saw in Canada, it will work. It'll be very effective, and it'll probably end up winning. And they're already starting to pull back on the mandates.
That'd been so funny if you just went on to the next story right after.
Like, that's it.
We should do that one
Thank you very much. But I am wondering if this is even a real story. I know there have been conversations about locking down the Super Bowl, but that seems weird to me. Almost like the idea was seeded specifically to ruin the Freedom Convoy. Because right now, regular people don't know, like I'm talking about average people sitting at home, of which there are very few, because I think most people are polarized. They're like, I don't know a whole lot about what's going on with that convoy thing. But the manipulation, the propaganda has mostly failed. You go on Reddit, and people are like, they're just working class dudes. They're drivers. The propaganda's not working. Well, you want to piss off regular people? Shut down the Super Bowl.
And I'm suspicious of DHS's warnings. It's like I think that it's likely that they could be just sort of trying to say there's a threat out there that's not really there, to make it seem like those extreme people, those truckers, they're going to try to kill your Super Bowl.
Yeah. Public warnings just don't make a lot of sense to me. If a military comes out and is like, China has you, we think that China has UFOs. Like, come on, dude, what are you telling me for?
Yeah,
I don't. You would only tell the people that it's a need to know thing. They would tell L.A. law enforcement about this. They wouldn't in surrounding areas. They wouldn't be telling the public.
Did you see that clip of the journalist arguing with the what was it Dan Price? What was his name? I don't know the guy's name.
remember his name.
He's
with the Canadian guy.
No. It's a journalist talking to an American official about Russia's false flag attack, because the U.S. keeps saying over and over again Russia's going to stage a false flag, and then he's like, "What proof do you have?" And they're like, "Well, we issued a transcript. That's something you said happened. What proof do you have?" And then he goes, "Crisis actors? Are you kidding? This is Alex Jones stuff."
Yeah.
And then he goes on to mention, I think, like the WMDs and like the war in Iraq. I'm like, that guy just snapped. Wow. Something happened to him. He woke up and the narrative broke.
Yeah.
He was just out of the matrix.
Yeah. And the government guy was going, what are you on Putin's side?
Yeah.
It's so funny how we return to that too. I remember during the 2012 election when Mitt Romney said something about Russia being a growing threat, and of course he would. He's like an establishment swamp creature. But the response from the left was, "Oh my goodness, isn't this hysterical? The 80s called, they want their villain back."
Yeah.
And then in 2016, when we're even more removed from that era, it's Russia.
Yeah.
What a strange villain. It's like we were joking about this in Burn After Reading, when she wants to sell the information to the Russians, and everyone in the CIA is like, the Russians?
Yeah,
why?
Yeah.
Like, what would they? Yeah.
Well, also because if you're not familiar with that movie, the information was nothing.
It's also the
It's
information
like,
it was nothing. But it's just like the Russians. Like, what?
I got a question for you guys. If a bunch of truckers showed up in D.C., and then something happened that a mass casualty event took the lives of these truckers, how do you think the left, the establishment left, and many leftists would react?
Mocking.
They would laugh until there was no one to bring them their food.
Yeah, exactly.
They absolutely would laugh.
Isn't that
they would
scary?
celebrate it. Yeah.
That's pretty scary. Yeah.
They'd say they deserved it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Maybe
Look at what they do to Ashley Babbitt. It's like
sometimes you get glimpses of humanity from people like Jake Tapper and stuff. So maybe people would be like, this is it. This is the moment that it went too far.
Well, I guess, sometimes the brain slug that infected his mind and took over his body loses control. And he's able to break out. And he's like, well, just all of a sudden on CNN, he's like, I love all of you. Honey, I love you. And
you're making me think of the Kent State shooting in 1970, May 4th, Kent State. I went to Kent State, and it was a big deal on campus. There was a big crowd of students protesting Vietnam, and then the National Guard came out to try and quiet them down. They were throwing rocks at the National Guard.
Yeah.
They opened fire on the crowd and killed 4, injured others. And it was a huge national, just a tragedy. And it basically was the beginning of the end of Vietnam.
Neil Young song, too.
Yeah,
Four
and
Dead in Ohio.
Buffalo Springfield.
Yeah.
Well, Neil was in Buffalo Springfield.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, but
wow.
the For What It's Worth.
That's such a good song.
Yeah, it's a great song. But
And the people who lost their lives weren't protesters, I'm pretty sure.
Wait. Yeah, Neil was in Buffalo Springfield.
When the
Oh,
shooting
really?
at Kent State happened, it was bystanders. It was just people who were on campus walking by. One guy
to sit on that hill.
But there was also injuries. One guy took a bullet through his wrist, I think, and it paralyzed his
I would
hand or
sit on the
something
hill
like
and envision all the people and just think about it sometimes. It's crazy, man.
One thing here, and I mean, this almost in some ways makes it more frightening, but I'll issue a caveat to this idea of left-wing people hypothetically laughing in the situation, and we seem to believe that many of them would. I think there's also an argument to be made that those among them who have some level of empathy for their opposition and don't necessarily hate everyone who stands in their way would still feel pressure to not care about the loss of life, because as soon as they stood up and said these are human beings, they'd be rejected, because that's exactly what happens to them when they say that about the unborn or any other group that the left is okay with the death of.